The federal government collected $4.9 trillion in the 2022 fiscal year.
The U.S. reached its debt limit yesterday.
The mountain of federal debt.
Defaulting on our debt is not an option.
The total amount of outstanding borrowing by the US federal government accumulated over the nation's history is $35.7 trillion. That is a staggering number, especially if we divide it by the number of people living in the United States, over $110,000 for every American. But what if I told you that understanding this debt could actually change how we view the US economy? Today, we will demystify the national debt, explore what it really means for us, and challenge some common beliefs that might not hold up. So hit a like button, subscribe, and let's dive in and see if all the debt is as scary as it sounds. The national debt is the total amount of money that the government owes to lenders, including foreign countries, investors, and even itself. It's a big deal in economic discussions because it affects everything, from government spending to your taxes. When we talk about national debt, a key figure to consider is the debt to GDP ratio. This ratio compares the national debt to the total value of everything the US economy produces in a year. Right now, that ratio is around 120%. This means that the national debt is 120% of the US gross domestic product, which reflects the overall health of our economy. But here is something interesting. Back after the World War II, the debt to GDP ratio was also about 120%. Just like today, people worried about that debt. But guess what happened? The economy bounced back strong by focusing on growth and innovation. The US managed to reduce the debt burden over the following decades without falling into a recession. Now, let's expand our view to other countries. For example, Japan's debt to GDP ratio is a whopping over 260%, yet they've navigated through this without experiencing a severe debt crisis. Why? Japan borrows in its own currency and has a strong economy backing that debt. Similarly, the United Kingdom has high debt levels after the World War II, often exceeding 200% of the GDP, but that didn't lead to a financial meltdown either. Their economies adapted and grew, allowing them to manage their debt effectively. So while $35 trillion sounds alarming at first glance, when we compare it to the US economy and other countries, it begins to look a bit different. It's not just about the size of the number, it's about how it fits into the bigger picture. So the real question is the level of debt really a crisis waiting to happen? Let's explore that in the next section. Now that we understand the size of the US debt, let's take a step back and look at historical context of debt crisis. It's essential to know that most debt crises in history happened in countries that borrowed money in foreign currency. For example, when countries like Argentina or Greece ran in financial trouble, they had borrowed in currencies they couldn't really control. When their economy stumbled, it became hard to pay back their debts, leading to defaults and crises. But here is where the United States stands out. The country borrows in its own currency, the US dollar. This gives America a unique advantage. If the US ever faces trouble, they can simply print more dollars to pay off their debt. Of course, that has its risks, but it's a safety net that many other countries don't have. Let's also talk about the Federal Reserve, the country's central bank. The Fed plays a vital role in managing the economy and debt. When investors see the Fed is backing US debt, they feel more confident about it. This confidence keeps interest rates low, making it easier for the government to borrow money. Now, let's illustrate how confidence can stabilize economies with an example from Europe. In 2012, Mario Draghi, the former president of the European Central Bank, famously said he would do whatever it takes to preserve the euro. That simple statement brought a wave of confidence back to the markets, calming fears and stabilizing the economy. So the US has a distinct advantage by borrowing in its own currency and having a central bank that supports it. This positions the United States differently from countries that have struggled under the weight of foreign debt. So does this mean we should ignore the national debt, or is there more to consider? Let's talk about the political side of the national debt. You might notice a bit of hypocrisy in the way some political parties operate. Many leaders love to claim they are fiscally responsible, but often support policies that actually make the debt situations even worse. It's like saying you want to lose weight while consistently ordering desserts. For example, both sides of the aisle have pushed for tax cuts and increased spending without considering the long-term impacts on our debt. When politicians cheer for programs that cost billions but don't suggest ways to pay for them, it complicates our ability to manage the debt sustainably. And let's be honest, political dysfunction isn't helping. The radicalization of certain parties has made it harder to reach consensus on solutions. Instead of working together to address the national debt, we often see partisan fights that prevent any real progress. This gridlock keeps us stuck in a cycle where no one wants to compromise, and that makes finding solutions even tougher. But what if I told you that just a few modest steps could help stabilize the debt as a percentage of GDP? Experts estimate that a combination of small tax increases and target spending cuts could make a significant difference. For example, increasing taxes by just 1% across the board or cutting discretionary spending by a similar amount could go a long way in managing the debt levels. These steps may seem small, but when applied consistently over time, they can help ensure the economy remains stable. So, how can we push our leaders to take these necessary steps? It's a challenge, but it's essential if we want to tackle the national debt responsibly. By the way, write your opinion in the comments. Is it better for society to raise taxes or cut government spending? Let's take a moment to debunk some common myths about the national debt. Many people worry that the US debt is a ticking time bomb that could lead to an economic collapse. Others fear that Social Security is on the brink of bankruptcy, but let's set the record straight. First, while the national debt may sound frightening, it's crucial to look at the bigger picture. Did you know that the US has significant assets totaling over $200 trillion? This means Americans have much more in resources than they owe. In fact, if you consider both the assets and liabilities, the US is in much stronger position than many realize. And what about Social Security? While it faces funding challenges, it's not going bankrupt tomorrow. It has a trust fund, and even without reforms, experts project it can pay out benefits for many years to come. So, while changes may be needed to ensure its long-term viability, it's not in immediate danger. Next, let's talk about the idea of exorbitant privilege. This phrase refers to the unique position of the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. Because many countries hold US dollars and treasuries as part of their foreign reserves, there is a constant demand for US debt. This demand helps keep interest rates low and makes it easier for the US to manage its debt effectively. As of April 2024, foreign countries own approximately $8 trillion in treasury securities, or 23% of total US debt. This global trust in US treasuries is a huge advantage. It means the United States can borrow at lower costs than many other countries, helping to sustain its economy. So, while the national debt is a serious issue that requires attention, many of the fears surrounding it are based on misconceptions. Understanding these truths can help us have a more balanced conversation about the American economy. As we can see, the national debt, now over $35 trillion, is indeed significant. However, it's essential to understand that it's manageable, especially when we consider the US's substantial assets, totaling well over $200 trillion. The unique position of the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency plays a crucial role in sustaining American economy. With strong global demand for US treasuries, the United States can borrow at lower costs compared to many other nations. But there is a catch. Political solutions are vital for the long-term sustainability of the debt. The political landscape is complicated with party contradictions and dysfunction, making it challenging to address the debt effectively. Moving forward, we need to come together to develop realistic solutions, whether through modest tax increases, smart spending cuts, or strategic investments in our future. Guys, don't forget to hit a thumbs up and subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. See you very soon.